I'm so sick of dealing with my mother-in-law. I'm a caretaker, that's what I do for a career, and now my husband is demanding that I stop that and become my mother-in-law's full-time caregiver. When I tell you guys she hates my guts, I'm just getting started. One of the things I got to realize late is if your mother-in-law does not like you, for the first few times you meet her, chances are she never will. I believed that with time I would get my mother-in-law to like me and accept me, but no matter how hard I tried, I realized later that I was only wasting my time and effort. When I first met my husband Richie, it gave me love at first sight vibes. I just finished college and was working as a caregiver for one of my clients when I met Richie. He worked at an organization not too far from where I live, so we kind of saw each other frequently. For the first 2 weeks of bumping into him or always seeing him on my way back from work, Richie and I did not really talk to each other, but that changed one day. That day, I walked past him like I usually did, but I maintained eye contact, and because we had seen each other so many times before that day, he just could not let me pass him by without saying, "Hello." We talked briefly and introduced ourselves to one another, and from there, our friendship blossomed, which eventually led to a relationship. In the past, I've been heartbroken by family and most of them men I've been with, so meeting someone like Richie and being with him brought so much light and happiness to me. Like every other couple, we had our fights from time to time, but I always made sure that we settled everything, irrespective of who was at fault. I used to believe that all that mattered in a relationship was peace, and it didn't really matter if I always apologized whenever Richie wronged me. But after so much reflection, I realized that I've made a terrible, grave mistake. If I say that dating Richie was more of a peachy date, flowers, gifts, and happiness, then I'd be lying. As Richie and I got to know ourselves better, I realized that he had serious anger issues. The kind of anger issues that would cause him to break things around him or even yell till his veins popped out on his neck and face. Since I always thought that I was always the one who triggered his anger, I believed that I would just cope with it and probably help him work on his anger issues as our relationship progressed, but I was wrong. Even though this was a major red flag, I did not want to leave Richie because I loved him so much, and I feared that I would not find another man like him. Aside from the bad side, Richie was also a good man. Whenever he wanted to be, at least. He knew how to make me feel loved, and he always was just talking about the future with me. Unlike the previous men that I've been with, Richie was different. He was hardworking, loving, caring, and the kind of man most women would dream of spending their lives with. After a year of dating, Richie moved in with me. Since my apartment was close to where he worked, we both decided it would be a great idea. He moved out of his mom's house and moved in with me, and he did. Unfortunately, 2 months after he moved in, Richie was laid off from work, so I was forced to take care of both of us till he got a job. I know most of you might probably be mad as you continue to read my story, but I wanted you all to understand that I did everything I did for Richie, out of love, because I believed that we would have a future together, so I chose to focus on his good side more than his bad side. Thankfully, after a month of searching for a job, Richie found a job with a better pay than his previous company. And after about a year, when things were in place, he popped the question and I said yes. So we started saving towards the planning of our wedding. Before the wedding, Richie had taken me to his mom's house several times, so I was no stranger to her. Prior to this time, I noticed that each time I visited Richie's mom with Richie, she would give me a cold reception or attitude. Richie just claimed that the reason his mother acted that way was because he had brought some woman home in the past, and each time his mom was excited to meet them, he would always break up, so she didn't want to get too excited this time. He also explained that her attitude had nothing to do with me, and once things were official between us, she would welcome me with open arms. But that never happened. I remember vividly the day Richie and I broke the news to his mother that we were getting married. She had a very blank expression on her face, and her only response was, "That's great." Sincerely, I was expecting more than just an "oh, that's great," but I tried my best to hide my disappointment. At the moment, I should have known that my mother-in-law would not like me, and that our relationship would be a very sour one in the future. But I tried my possible best to please her. Since she was an elderly woman, none of her children still lived with her. Most times I would go as far as cooking for her, cleaning her house and helping her with laundry. I'd even buy her gifts, and I single-handedly took care of the expensive dress she wore on our wedding. I did all of this to impress her. Despite doing all these things, my mother-in-law's attitude towards me became worse, and each time I complained to Richie, he would tell me to give her just a little more time. On our wedding day, I noticed that mother-in-law deliberately refused to stand close to me during the picture session, and she refused to take, quote, the bride and mother-in-law picture. She deliberately disappeared when it was time for our shot, and it was very, very heartbreaking. Fast forward 2 years after our wedding. Things got worse between my mother-in-law and me, and every time something was wrong and I tried to complain to Richie, Richie would just take his mother's side. It even got to the point where I tried to complain to Richie about the way my mother-in-law was treating me. And he would start yelling at me and accusing me of being the offender. He would say something like, "My mother's never treated anyone like this, so if she doesn't like you, you're the problem." And every time he said this, he would keep yelling and yelling until he left the house. Eventually, when I was tired of Richie's constant yelling and my male's attitude, well, I spoke with one of my friends who was also dealing with a difficult mother-in-law, and she advised me to stop trying to impress Richie's mom and just carry on with life and pretend that she simply does not exist. And that's what I did. I stopped caring about what mother-in-law thought of me. I didn't complain about her anymore to Richie, and I started paying more attention to myself and our daughter. I completely ignored her like she did not even exist, just as my friends had advised me. And surprisingly, I think 4 to 5 months after I started doing this, my mother-in-law fell ill. Since we did not have a good relationship, I did not visit her at the beginning. It's not the stage of her illness, at least. And I thought it was something small, but the illness just kept escalating and escalating. And Richie's older sister, who's a nurse, tried her best to visit their mom every weekend to see why she could care for her and help her. But as this sickness kept getting worse, she could not keep up with traveling the long distance every week. So she talked to Richie, and they decided that it would be better if my mother-in-law moved in with us so I could look after her since I was a caregiver. At first, I thought that they were joking because I was already having a hard time caring for our toddler daughter, and I wasn't ready for another burden. But Richie begged me to. He even said that it would be a great opportunity for me to bond with and get to know my mother-in-law. Also, since I was a professional caregiver, that I would be able to nurse her back to health in no time. Well, this was a very tough decision to make, given that my mother-in-law and I were always butting heads, and she always used the slightest opportunity she had to badmouth how I was taking care of her granddaughter. After a lot of begging from Richie and his older sister, I agreed for my mother-in-law to move in with us. I was thinking that since I was the one who would feed her, care for her, and help her out, she would be nicer and kind to me, but I was wrong. Again, my mother-in-law was a total pain in the butt, and she would always complain about the meals I made for her, the way I bathed her, and literally complain about everything that I did for her. Unfortunately, months after she moved in with us, her health was not improving and her condition was worsening. So this meant I had, need to keep caring for her. On the other hand, Richie made things harder for me. Even when he was off from work, he would never look after his mother or do anything to help her. Instead, he would stay at home all day watching TV or doing something else. He didn't help with anything at home, not with our daughter, cleaning, shopping for groceries, or anything. He just left everything for me. And it wasn't easy to be the responsible one for everything. For the months that followed, Richie's mom continued to be a pain in the butt. She would deliberately knock off meals from her meal table, poop in her pants, and do other disgusting things to punish me. By this time, Richie turned worse too. He would disappear for 2 to 3 days. And just any time he showed up, he would chat with his mom for a while, grab some clothes, and then leave again. Most times, the only way I knew Richie dropped by the house was through his clothing that was missing from the wardrobe. He just didn't care about how I was coping with his daughter and his mom, and while he was away, he never called to check on us. As time passed, the responsibility of having to juggle everything at home began to weigh me down and affect my work. I was no longer as productive as I used to be because I barely had time to rest. My toxic mother-in-law wasn't helping matters either. If she wasn't making a mess of herself, then she would be insulting me. She would call me all kinds of terrible names and also say that I sucked at caregiving. She also would go so far as saying that if I've been hired to be her caretaker, she would have gotten rid of me a long, long time ago. The turning point for me was when my daughter fell sick last week and my mother-in-law demanded that I ignore my sick daughter and look after her. Yeah, LOL, right? That was the day I decided I've had enough of her. I told her that from that moment I was no longer looking after her and she could tell her son to find her someone else. Funny enough, she didn't say anything to me until Richie returned the next day. When Richie came and saw the terrible, stinky state his mother was in, he started yelling and calling me names. I was home that day and I was making food for myself and our daughter when he came in. You guys, Richie insulted me and called me names. Then he ordered that I go into his mother's room and clean her up. I told him that I would do no such thing, and hearing that infuriated him even more. In our daughter's presence, he started yelling so loud and began to break everything in sight. When he was done breaking all the crap, I still stood my ground. I told him that caring for his mother was affecting my work and I was not ready to put my work in jeopardy. Guess what, guys? Richie said that he didn't give a damn about my work and that his mother, who was his family, was more important to him than my stupid job. At that point, I could no longer hold in my anger. So I told him to ask his sister, who was a nurse, to move in with us and care for his mother, or better yet, he should send his mother to his sister's house so she could look after her. Our voices were so loud that I was sure some of the neighbors were listening from their own house, but normally each time Richie and I fought, I was always the first to apologize. So he was low-key expecting that I would apologize and do as he said, but when I didn't, he was surprised. It even made him angry that I could stand up to him and speak to him in that tone. After yelling for minutes, he went ahead and said, "From now on, I ban you from being a caregiver to anybody else. My mother should have been your priority." He said this in a very commanding tone, and I burst into a very loud laughter. I looked him in the eye and told him that he didn't have that kind of power over me, and I told him that I was done taking care of his ungrateful mother. So, if he wanted, he could hire a live-in caregiver for her, or if he wanted, he could get it himself since his mother was so precious to him. Richie was so shocked at my response, and he looked at me in absolute disbelief. When he saw that this manipulation did not work, he threatened me. He told me that if I refused to look after his sick mom, then he had no other choice but to divorce me. Now, in the few years that we've been married, this wasn't the first time Richie was threatening divorce on me. It was something that he always said every time we had an argument. At the slightest provocation, he would threaten to divorce me, and I always begged him. The reason he did was because he knew I had a fear of abandonment. My dad left me and Mom when I was 6 years old, and my past relationship always ended with guys leaving me. Also, he knew I didn't want to be a single mom because I had seen how much my mom struggled to raise me, so he used all of that against me. Surprisingly, that day it was different. I had enough of him threatening to divorce me all the time, so I told him that he should go ahead, because I was equally tired of our marriage and I desperately needed the divorce too. Then I walked out on him. The minute I walked out on him, he starts to yell again. He called me ungrateful and all sorts of words. And he said that he should have known earlier that marrying me was a waste of time, and that his mother warned him against it, but he simply did not listen. He just kept talking and yelling like a madman. I knew that it was only a matter of time before he would throw me out, of the place, and I knew Richie so well, and I knew it was something he was capable of doing, so instead of waiting to be thrown out of the house on the street, I packed a few of my clothes and our daughter's clothes, and we left while he was in his mother's room trying to clean her up. As of the moment, I'm currently living in a motel with my daughter, and it's a breath of fresh air. I'm also very heartbroken because this was not what I envisioned for our future. I always imagined us being happy, bubbly, go-happy family, and Richie would always be spending time with his daughter. If I say being divorced doesn't scare me, then I'm lying. It really does, but at the same time, I don't see myself and my daughter living in a toxic environment. I would love to get custody of our daughter because Richie doesn't know how to be a dad. And the last person I want our daughter to be around is my mother-in-law. I'd love to ask, Am I the a-hole for wanting to divorce Richie? Enough of the emotional and verbal abuse from him and his mother. I'm so confused right now, and I need help from you guys. I look forward to your comments and suggestions. Thank you. Update number 1. Hey guys, thanks again for the comments and suggestions. I'm so glad and relieved to know that I'm not the only one who's had an experience with a toxic, manipulative husband. Yes, you guys are right to a level. I did not just realize that Richie was a manipulative person after we got married. It was something I noticed while we were dating, but I believed that he would never try his manipulation on me. Also, about his anger issue, he promised me that he would work on it, and I thought that I would play a role in helping him change, but I was wrong. Someone here said that I cared too much about Richie's mom, and I should have minded my business right from the first few times I noticed that she didn't like me. Well, I can't really explain why I desperately wanted her to like me. I thought it was normal for a mother-in-law and her daughter-in-law to have a good relationship, and that's what I wanted. Also, the reason I kept trying to, because that's what Richie told me. He told me about how his mother was such a great woman, and how she was holding back and would accept me with love once things were official between us, so I guess I just kept trying to impress her. It was after our marriage that I began to notice that nothing had changed in the way my mother-in-law treated me. In fact, the way she looked at me and talked to me only worsened. Most times we would be at family dinners, and my mother-in-law would be talking to everyone. But the minute I chipped in something or spoke to her directly, she would ignore me and continue just talking to whoever she was talking to. Also, the last argument I had with Richie was the first time I heard that my mother-in-law advised Richie against marrying me. I don't know if he was deliberately saying that to hurt me because he knew how I wanted his mother to like me, but whatever his intention was, I don't care anymore. I'm just sick and tired of him and his mom. It's been 2 weeks since I've left the house, and I'm now staying at my mom's place. I'm steadily looking for a good divorce lawyer that will help me out with the case. Well, Richie has not contacted me since I left with our daughter, and he probably thinks that I'll come home begging him to reconsider the divorce. But oh boy, he's in for a surprise. My mom has been very supportive, and she's also mad that I had to tolerate Richie for so long, as well as let him treat me like that. These past few days have just been days of peace of mind, and I'm sure Richie is having a great time taking care of his mom. LOL. Thank you guys for the support and encouragement. You guys have given me strength. I will make another update pretty soon. Update number 2. Hello everyone. I can't thank you all enough for your support and comments. They really mean so much to me. First, I'd like to apologize for taking a while to make this update. I'd love to tell you all that I finally found a good divorce lawyer, and so far we've been doing fine. I filed for the divorce, and when my lawyer contacted Richie, he went crazy. The day Richie got notified that I was divorcing him, he called me and yelled at me on the phone. He called me so many times and said that she was doing me a favor by marrying me, and yet I was paying him back with pure evil. It was quite funny because no matter what he said, none of them got to me. Richie is a very abusive person, so he always has a mouthful of curse words and degrading words. Sincerely, I really enjoyed hearing the pain and anger in his voice. It's kind of odd, but I was very satisfied that he was pained. After yelling and abusing me, he just promised that he would make sure that he made my life miserable. And my response was, "Sure, you can do that in your spare time when you're not cleaning up your mom." And I ended the phone call. After I ended the call, he kept blowing up my phone until he was tired of it, and 2 days after my lawyer contacted Richie, we met to discuss the divorce, and he found out that I was asking for alimony. Actually, I never thought of alimony. All I was concerned about was getting custody of our daughter. But when you guys mentioned in the comment that I should go for alimony, I discussed it with my lawyer, and she assured me that it was definitely possible. You all should have seen Richie's face and how angered he was. He looked leaner than the last time I saw him. He was stressed and he had a big eye bags, and there's no need to ask because I know the reason he looks the way he does. It's because he's juggling caring for his sick mom and his job, and it's absolutely wearing him out. After our discussion with the lawyer, I did not contain him or speak with him again until he called me yesterday. Before I took his call, he sent a text message begging that I at least give him one more opportunity to talk, and that he would be calling shortly. A few minutes after I got his message, he called, and when I took his call, he was pretending to cry over the phone. He told me how he missed me so much and that his life was a total mess. Also, being without me and our daughter showed him how empty his world was, and he begged me to reconsider the divorce and come back home. I told him that's not happening and that the only reason he was calling to beg was because caring for his mother was wearing him thin, and he could no longer handle the responsibility. Being Richie, he denied that and had nothing to do with his mother, and he actually missed me. I laughed so hard and told him, well, it's too late, and I ended the phone call. I knew it was only a matter of time before he'd switch on me, and I was right, because the next time he called, his first words were, "You little piece of garbage." I hung up and blocked his number from calling me, and the next time he'll be talking to each other, it's going to be from court. Thank you guys so much, and other updates coming up soon enough. Update number 3. Hi guys, I know some of you might have probably forgotten about me because it's been so long. I wanted to wait till the divorce was concluded because I didn't want to bore you with too many stories. I never thought a day would come when I would say this, but I'm happily divorced and I'm living my best life. My court hearing was 2 weeks ago, and it was also the second time I saw Richie after the meeting with the lawyer. Days after Richie got the divorce papers, he refused to sign them, but one morning my lawyer called me to inform me that he has signed them, so we could proceed. When I saw Richie in court, I almost did not recognize him because of how miserable he looked. We didn't talk to each other, except when we were asked questions and he chose to argue. Well, to cut the long story short, Richie is officially divorced. He's been ordered to pay me huge alimony and I won child custody. He looked very disappointed for a moment and I did feel bad for him. We would have made a big happy family if he wasn't being such a jerk. I thought that since the judge had ruled in my favor, that would be the end of Richie's problems, but I guess I was just mistaken. 2 days ago, he showed up at my mom's house demanding to see and take our daughter out. And I told him that he only had the weekends, but he said, and I quote you, "Oh, some stupid judge is not going to tell me how much time I'll spend with my daughter." And he tried to push me by to get inside the house, but thankfully the door was just slightly open, so I was able to lock it before he entered. When he didn't succeed, he starts banging on the door and yelling our daughter's name. I called the cops. I filed a restraining order, and hopefully that'll keep him away from me. It's quite funny how he never came to visit his daughter when we moved out of the house or when we were processing the divorce papers, but suddenly he showed up and demanded to take her to the kids' park? Not happening, buddy. You might all think it's inhumane for me to file a restraining order against the father of my child. It's not. Richie was someone who didn't care about his daughter even when we were living together, so why the sudden change? Anyways, that aside, I'm so happy to say that for the past few months I've had this genuine peace of mind. I can do whatever I want without worrying about going home on time to look after that sick, ungrateful jerk. Well, right now all I do is take care of myself and my daughter, and I try to support my mom whenever that I can. I'm still healing from everything that's happened, but I'll make sure that I take my time. I wouldn't have done all this or even gone ahead with the divorce if it wasn't for the support I got from everybody here. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your helpful comments and suggestions. Thank you to the community that's listened. So there was mixed feelings for the end of the story, how it did go about ending. A lot of the commenters were actually against the restraining order, because they were saying, how can you hold back your baby daddy from seeing his kid? But a lot of commenters were coming to the rescue saying, no, he was making it a very, very toxic environment, and there's no proof of what he was capable of. So I do want to know your thoughts on that. Do you think that it was too far for OP to go ahead and get that restraining order? Let's talk about it down below. Maybe somebody out there has a similar experience and they know firsthand what the real right decision was. Guys, my name's Mr. Reddito. Thank you for joining me on today's stories. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want more daily videos, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a fantastic day, And of course, just remember it's cool to be kind. See ya.